really great. I think we have an interesting crowd of people from Texas and across basically the globe. So here today, what we'll do is basically talking about a country risk assessment and together with a case from Indonesia, so on the PYX resources. So just an intro about myself. So what we do, GAIA is we're building the investment platform for the mining industry, but especially in the energy metals, so which is important like copper, lithium, or nickel mines. I think zircon is a part of also an important factor actually across the chain. And the idea is because we have a big issue, I think, for the mining companies to raise funds at this stage, just because of general perception about mining sector. So a lot of mainstream, let's say my peers, because I was managing a mining fund in France, and most of the mainstream investors, they will say, oh, it's not ESG compliant, so I cannot invest in. Whereas when we look at energy metals, kind of the overall chain, it is upstream, and we have to have kind of energy metal supply to solve the issues of energy transition, right? So here today, I think what I will do is with Oliver, so chairman of PYX resources, I'll start with a really short brief about a country risk assessment, what we have in terms of research on that, because this is very important factor for the investors. Basically, I know when they decide to invest in the company. And then secondly, Oliver will run you through on the practices, Indonesia, why Indonesia, and how PYX resources basically practice or operate in the country.
Okay, very good.
Yeah. So here, what's interesting, I don't know if anyone here have heard about Fraser Institute. It's kind of a golden Bible basically for, let's say, mining investors like us. So Fraser is an independent institution, Canadian, and they do a lot of research on the country risk, and they rank different countries in a different tiering, basically. And so eventually, like most investors, at least I know in Europe, they will choose the countries rated by Fraser as tier 1 or tier 2 jurisdictions. And then usually, we've got a lot of research, and then the issue is mining is pretty specific. The big pain, I think, of the mining sector is it's really hard to get a generalist on board. So most of the space when we attend mining conferences, most of the investors, they are specialists because the generalists don't know how it works. So what is good here is the resource, the research, like Fraser, they have a special kind of specific coverage on natural resources, energy, and then also linked to the ESG. Because when we basically at that time label our mining fund as ESG fund, we went through all the general conventional ratings like MSCI or Sustainalytics. We found basically most of the mining companies are not covered by the kind of general agencies. Okay. And so what's interesting, I think the key figure I want to share with you guys here is, so we have the ranking of jurisdictions, but at the end of the day, it's like, all the rating agencies, right? The kind of ranking has to be used. Otherwise, it's useless ranking. So then what we see is the kind of the policy factors or they publish, it influences or at least 40% of the investors survey. They say, okay, actually it impacts our investment decisions on the company. So then, what is kind of a country risk? I think for mining, and Oliver will probably go through, we have a lot of licenses. It's about, we have, as an exploration, we have exploration license, and then as developer, we have operating licenses. And then we've got also social license, basically, right? What's the relation with local communities and how we handle this. And then eventually different countries, especially African countries or some new frontier, they will impose certain percentage of royalties or stake in the mining companies, right? So all this kind of we have to take into account basically when we do the IRR analysis of the investment. And then another thing is also on top of that, usually it becomes even more important because probably you guys know, we look at mining companies, we look at life of mine. So usually like the gold mine is kind of short, it's only 10 years, whereas copper is 20, 25 years or even longer. So that means the mining cycle is pretty long. So that's why all the factors is very important because it's eventually impact your returns over kind of 10 or 20 years because your investment is not like software business. Like the payback will be probably sometimes 2 years, but that can take 10 or 20 years to get it really live. So eventually, like when we look at the country risk factors, so here's what we have, like in terms of political risk. Is it kind of mining friendly country? We got the case of I think Oceana Gold, which is listed on TSX, Toronto Stock Exchange. They've been operating in Philippines for over 20 years, pretty good relations. But lately they got a problem, they cannot renew the license. And then they just have to sustain their mining, kind of the mine on site. And that's just because of change of politicians. You know, the Department of Mining, the Ministry of Mining in the country. So they cannot get. And then economic risks as well, sometimes. What happened is, I think probably we'll talk about later, recently we've got a lot of cases like executives detained in certain African countries or high, let's say, inflation countries, because when the economy is not really working well in the country, they're looking for all sources of funding. So eventually they may go back to their existing deal, say, okay, you need to pay me the taxes you owe me during the past 10 years or something. Yeah. And then social environmental risk is very important, something people don't have in mind because when they invest mining thing it's very fluting, but actually during the whole process, the social license is very important because a lot of mines are located in remote areas. So the community's relation is very important because if you don't well manage the communities, you could lose basically the labor force and they go on strike, and the mine company still has to pay basically all the licenses, all the operations on site, whereas the labor is on strike. And then the environmental, we have usually like during the whole process of the mining, what we call pre-feasibility study or all the kind of report we have to submit. Actually, there's environmental assessment report that has to be validated to get the environmental license. And then once the mine is done, then at the end there's also rehabilitation of the mine site, right, to get it into a stage predefined. And then legal regulatory risk, of course, it's about the general kind of taxes or regimes and operational infrastructure risk also. It's very important. Usually, some journalists will say, okay, the mine, I don't care where it is, but actually we do care. So in terms of operational risk or infrastructure risk, when we invest in mine, we look at whether there is a water access. Water is very important in the process. Whether there's road. If there's no road, that means you have to build the road, right, to truck the ores to the smelters. And then also whether there's a grid. If there's electricity from the south, because otherwise it will be on diesel and it will be much more expensive, right? So a very interesting case study here. It's very recent, just in November 11th. Resolute, a mining company operating in Mali, a gold mine, and with management team actually based in Perth. So it's Australians operating on a African mine, and then the stock kind of dropped 30% just because executives they are detained by Mali government when they were on site. And why is that? Because of the current situation we know in Mali, and they're looking for new sources of funding, right? So then they grade on certain deals. So this is kind of risk is very important, and that can really hurt, I would say, your return on the investment. And then other interesting thing, I think I'll invite you guys to check it out. So Altiplan Open Research is our partner based in Paris, and then they have a group of researchers who released a climate index. So that is really, they look at all the DMs or emerging country economies and look at macro variables and also climate data to say, okay, which country is more risk to the climate changes or climate regulations we're having, right? So probably, you know, like all the mining companies who do business with European countries. Now we have the CSRD, so Corporate Sustainability Report Directive in Europe, and then we have also the battery directive, which will in place from 2026, I think, which impose a transparency on the ESG or the carbon, the climate data, or on all the suppliers doing business with European companies. And then I think probably you guys know, you know, others like OECD or ES, you know, all different kind of major rating agencies or let's say intelligence agents, they have their risk. It's like ESG framework basically. We've got over 10 or something frameworks, but at the end of the day, when we do investment like then which kind of classification or rating is really relevant to us, right, to our investment. So here, what we believe after kind of our, let's say, analysis, we would say conventional indicators usually they overlook some factors which are specific to the mining sector. And so those are what we list out. I won't go through, you know, all the points, but those I think are the risks really specific to the mining sector we have to take into account. And then eventually our conclusion will be the further is a good framework to start, and then to analyze a mining kind of country specific risk, we have to have kind of a specialist research to cover on that and to really do due diligence in terms of the investment case. So yeah, that is just a really very short summary about country risk assessment, what we do when we do the mining investment assessment. So now I will pass to Oliver, so who is the chairman of GAIA Resources.